The three Galacticos at Manchester United should sign under new owners. Will Apple build a new stadium if they do indeed take over at Manchester United? And who are the world-class players in this current Manchester United squad? But before I go any further, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Private Internet Access. Private Internet Access hides your IP address and encrypts your internet connection. It works with all major streaming services, including BBC iPlayer and ITV, from wherever you are in the world. I'm currently in Spain and so I cannot watch those channels. However, with Private Internet Access, I can with the click of a button, setting my location to the UK, from where I can then watch the World Cup matches completely for free with perfect quality. And so Private Internet Access has become essential for me during this World Cup. Private Internet Access is offering Atlantis Football subscribers 4 extra months completely free when you sign up for a 2-year deal. That's 4 completely free extra months on a 2-year deal. So even after the World Cup, you can still enjoy all the benefits that come with Private Internet Access and save money at the same time. The link will be left in the description below for you to get Private Internet Access now. And of course, a big thank you to Private Internet Access for sponsoring today's video. A link will be left in both the description and the comment section below for you to click at the end of this video. So with the recent revelations that the Glazer family will be looking to sell Manchester United for the first time in 17 years, a surprise but exciting candidate to take over is the richest company in the world, Apple, who are valued at a market cap of $2.65 trillion, which is almost as much as Kylian Mbappe earns in a year. Now at this moment in time, it's unclear the likelihood of this takeover happening, but given that Apple are even being spoke about in regards to taking over a sports team, it has to make you think that they are maybe seriously contemplating the venture. But what would Manchester United actually look like under an Apple ownership? Well, I will be going over some predictions I'd have if Apple were to take over, but mostly this will apply to both Apple or any real wealthy consortium from the Middle East, as both are dripping in money like Ivan Toney after the 8-way accumulator comes in on a Saturday. So first of all, if any extremely wealthy owner came in, this probably would apply, but for this specific example of Apple, the stinginess in the transfer market and the suppressed appetite to really attack the window and bring in the best players possible would surely have to disappear. And so instead of seeing Manchester United in the same category as the likes of Tottenham, Arsenal, Inter Milan and AC Milan, they would instantly be elevated to competing with the likes of Real Madrid, Barcelona, PSG and Manchester City if they had Champions League football to accompany their new owners. And so what should they do with this increased power in the transfer market? Well, I think that now United would be elevated into that elite category of super clubs, they have to target the elite players. At the moment, it's really only Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes who could be considered world-class players at this very moment. I think Varane and De Gea are now just below that level, whilst Luke Shaw and Lisandro Martinez have shown shades of this level, though I don't think they've performed at this level over a sustained period as of yet to fully be categorised in that category. Players like Sancho, Antony, Garnacho, Rashford, Martial and Dalot are all potential world-class players, but potential is just that, potential. So United now need to be going into the market looking to bring in some truly elite players to take their squad to a world-class level in order to compete with the likes of Manchester City, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich and PSG. So who should they target? Well, when targeting specific elite players, I think it's best to strategize it for a 2-year window, as sometimes the best players in a certain position just simply aren't available during a certain transfer window. So rather than signing backup options who maybe aren't at the same level, waiting until the next transfer window or the next year can be the better option. We saw this with Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool with their specific targeting of Alisson and Van Dijk for big fees, but who turned out to be 2 signings that turned Liverpool from a top 4 side to Premier League and European champions. And I think United are now at a stage where their squad is good enough where they can do this. Lisandro Martinez, Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes are probably the 3 that will be nailed on starters for Ten Hag over the coming years, with players like Antony and Sancho, Rashford and Garnacho, Shaw and Malacia and Dalot and Varane all being players who will be starters at some points, but I wouldn't say they're nailed on, at least as much as the other 3 I previously mentioned. But the main areas where they do need to improve are at goalkeeper, as well as De Gea has shown he's still a top level stopper. As I've said in previous videos, which I will be leaving linked below, I still think there are better sweeper and ball playing keepers on the market that would take Ten Hag's build up and pressing systems to the next level. Competition for Dalot at right back is needed, as well as an alternative and long term successor to Varane at centre back, and a creative deeper line midfielder to play alongside Casemiro. Upgrading and providing competition for Eriksen is also needed, and just in general I think alongside a centre forward, United United need world-class attackers in their front line, as at the top level it's the Mbappes, Lewandowskis, Haalands and Benzemas who really make the difference, and there are a few players in world football who I think right now are in that world-class category, and to me are players who are likely to become legends of the game by the end of their career. Kylian Mbappe is the obvious first player, who already at the age of 23, soon to be 24, is on the cusp of going down as a legend of the game. He only recently signed a new deal with PSG last summer until 2025, but talk has been circulating that he is reportedly looking to leave PSG before the expiration of his contract, and with Real Madrid seemingly reluctant to push for a move after having their fingers burnt at the start of last summer, Manchester United, particularly under new ownership with Champions League football, have to be the front runners for his signature. Now people will counter this by saying that Mbappe will cost an exorbitant amount of money in terms of the transfer fee, alongside the wage package, which accompanied with his massive and sometimes disruptive ego is something that United should avoid. However, I think Mbappe is so good that even with the cost and the diva attitude, if United can bring him in then they should do it, as he's really that good, a complete game changer. We've seen Haaland's impact since coming in at Manchester City, being well worth £200 million in my opinion, let alone the 60 million odd that City spent on him, and I genuinely think that Mbappe and Haaland are in a league of their own, capable of challenging Messi and Ronaldo's throne, and definitely players that can be in the argument for being a top 5 player of all time at the end of their careers. And right now I think Mbappe is a better player than Haaland, being a lot more complete. Haaland is maybe just slightly better at being a pure goal scorer inside the box, but Mbappe isn't exactly bad. Both players rank in the 99th percentile when compared against every other forward in Europe's top 5 leagues over the past 365 days for their non-penalty goals, with Haaland recording 1.01 per 90 and Mbappe with 0.92 per 90, and both players overperform their non-penalty XG by 0.22 goals per 90 or more. However, the distinction between Haaland and Mbappe comes with their creative ability, as Mbappe's FBref report just shows how complete he is, ranking in the 90th percentile or higher, and in almost every case the high 90th percentiles for pretty much every possession metric. And so when compared against Haaland's FBref report, we can see that Mbappe is very much an elite complete forward, whereas Haaland is an elite goal scorer. Bringing in Mbappe would give United not just the best player in the league, but the best player in the world, and for at least 5 years, possibly more than that as well. And the frightening thing is, players generally seem to peak around 30 years old, and Mbappe is still 6 years off that, so imagine how good he can actually become. Under the ownership of an Apple or a Middle Eastern consortium, United would be able to create their own Galactico project, and whilst Florentino Perez and Real Madrid have given the term a bad name for their seemingly clueless and uncoordinated signings of big name players from 2000 to 2006, and then from 2009 to a few years on from that, who simply just didn't function together in a team, I actually do like the idea. However, rather than just signing world-class talent sporadically and leaning heavily towards attacking players like Perez did, it seems much better to take a more strategic and sensible approach. Alongside Mbappe, another Galactico could be Theo Hernandez. Now this may seem like a bit of a random one considering that United already have Malacia and Shaw, but if you've watched Theo Hernandez at the World Cup for France, you'll understand why I put him in this category. Whilst I do like Shaw and I think he's a very good left back for United and Ten Hag, Theo is another level. Defensively I think he's a lot more solid than Shaw, who seems to have a knack of switching off positionally inside of the box, particularly from crossing positions, allowing his man to run off of him, with Daniel James's goal for Fulham in United's last game before the World Cup being a perfect example of this. Theo would be an improvement on Luke Shaw defensively, and while Shaw is a very good attacking fullback in my opinion, Theo is an elite attacker, and not just for a fullback. His FBref report shows just how good he is in terms of his goal scoring, his goal creating, and his ball progression, and he kind of reminds me of what Gareth Bale could have become if he had remained as a left back, a powerful athletic runner who can drive the ball forward down the left side, looking like a 200-metre runner as he accelerates past opposition players, whilst also having the capabilities and variety of going down the outside of the flank or providing underlapping runs and carries through the centre of the pitch. He'd be expensive, not as much as Mbappe, but likely around the £70 million mark, but given that he's still only 25 years old, I do think it's worth it. And imagine Theo and Mbappe on United's left side. The amount of pace, power, technical ability and creativity would be insane. And I don't think it's even that much of a stretch to say that Theo behind Mbappe could literally turn out to be one of the best fullback winger combinations in football history, and both are still only in their mid-20s, so are going to play and improve together and also hit their peak around the same time most likely as well. Whilst I would be happy to keep Luke Shaw, I just think that Theo would take United's attack down that left side to a completely different level that really no other left back in world football could, barring maybe Alphonso Davies in a few years. Now before I come on to the other Galactico that I would bring in, let me just go through some of the other changes that I think could come with Apple specifically taking over at Old Trafford. So the obvious one is a shirt sponsor, which almost certainly after the expiration of the current sponsorship contract would become Apple. So expect to see Apple's logo on the red of the Manchester United shirt. Another obvious move would be to provide the reported $1.5 billion to completely rebuild Old Trafford. It's no secret that Manchester United Stadium is in dire need of renovation, with the ceiling of some of the stands having seepage of rain throughout different points over the last decade. And if you ask any match-going fans, they'll just tell you in general the whole stadium needs a refurbishment. And the fact that a club the size of Manchester United has this problem, whilst both Real Madrid and Barcelona are undergoing massive renovations themselves, and the likes of Arsenal and Tottenham have completely moved to high-level modern stadiums in the last 20 years, is pretty symbolic of the Glazers' tenure. Under Apple's ownership, you can guarantee that any stadium renovations or even a completely new stadium would be groundbreaking. Money would be no object because Apple is literally the richest company in the world in terms of cash flow, and if they were to build a stadium to represent Apple, it would almost certainly be top notch, the best in the world in every department. I mean, just off the top of my head, I could imagine that there would be screens everywhere, giving fans in the stadium a perfect view of VAR decisions and highlights of the game, as well as showing advertising which would provide increased revenue. Ordering food and drinks would become much more efficient, and the overall matchday fan experience would become so much more seamless and comfortable than it is now.
Old Trafford should be the jewel in the crown really for any club, but it's fallen behind the times because they haven't kept improving and renovating. There's been new stadiums being built for a number of clubs, so I suppose at some point United fans were going to ask, well, do we need a new stadium? Is Old Trafford really fit for purpose?
A lot of fans, I guess if you speak to them, would say it's since the Glazers took over 17 years ago. They believe that money hasn't been invested into the stadium to keep it up to the standards of the likes of City, Tottenham, Arsenal. They
see themselves as, you know, the biggest club in the world, certainly the biggest club in England. They should have a stadium that matches that, and at the time when they took over, it was that. I mean, it's still the second largest stadium in the country, behind Wembley, the biggest club stadium in the country, but when you're in there, there's so many things that are kind of dilapidated and falling apart in terms of the closeness of the seats, the concourses being quite crowded, the roof obviously leaking. I mean, that was the major thing, wasn't it, a few years ago when you literally had journalists, you had fans getting soaked on because the roof wasn't up to scratch. I mean, that's a basic thing, surely.
The expectations have changed massively. Some of the biggest clubs in the world have moved stadiums, and you look at their stadiums, you look at the facilities, you look at how they've moved with the times. These are the sort of clubs that you'd put on the same level or a similar level to Manchester United, and then you think, well, why aren't United doing that? Why aren't we moving with the times?
Anfield has been redeveloped in an impressive way. Tottenham's new stadium has all things that we probably wouldn't even considered, right?
That Tottenham stadium, they put the cup on the beer and the beer comes straight up. The last time they modernised here, I don't think anyone would have even thought that was a thing. If they want to be up there with the best in terms of facilities, then they're going to have to strip it all back and not necessarily demolish the whole thing. If you look what Real Madrid have done with their stadium, they've managed to keep it but modernise it. I think something like that might be the best balance to keep the history, keep the prestige that it's got, whilst bringing it in line with the modern stadiums that we've seen and the facilities that they offer.
I think you can do things with the bowl. There's space underneath the Stretford end, there's space underneath the Sir Alex Ferguson stand that you could actually make into a more inclusive atmosphere for fans to go early and kind of be a part of it and chat and mingle.
If you look at the South Stand, it is just that one tier, so they are going to expand the capacity. That is the place to do it really, but there's been logistical reasons in the past and obviously big financial reasons as to why they've not done it.
Right behind the Sir Bobby Charlton stand there's a railway line. and it's literally, you know, about 10 yards away. So they haven't been able to build a stand over that railway line. Just the engineering and the cost of it is very difficult.
Without getting into cliches, where there's a will, there's a way. If you wanted to build a better stadium, if you wanted to expand this stadium, you can do it. We've been doing that for over 100 years. This stadium isn't the same stadium it was when we first moved here.
The last thing that got done at the stadium was the quadrant, and that was 2006. This would be the first major redevelopment since the Glazers took over.
I could also see United's training ground Carrington being massively improved as well, allowing the club's facilities to compete with the likes of Manchester City. So alongside the stadium, you could also expect to see Apple massively upgrade United's training ground, which probably doesn't make that much difference unless there is some crazy sort of technology that Apple can bring, which, to be fair, knowing Apple, will probably be the case. So that's what Apple could do for United's infrastructure, but before I go back to the transfers, remember that if you enjoyed this video, to give it a like, subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you do get notified when my videos come out. I am working on videos on Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford amongst some others, and I'll leave some other videos that I think you may find interesting in the description below. So the last Galactico transfer I'm going to talk about to come in alongside Mbappe and Theo is Frankie de Jong. I analysed him to death over the summer, so you can check out one of those videos if you do want a more in-depth analysis. But to be brief, I think in terms of a central midfielder who is press resistant in deep areas, has the ball carrying ability to progress the attack forward at pace, and has the incisive passing ability to break lines with his forward passes, there's probably no one more complete than Frankie de Jong that United could go for at the moment. Whilst he is going to be expensive, with Barcelona likely commanding a fee of around £70 to £80 million, and also would likely be on around £400,000 per week, I think if United did want a premium option to play in that central midfield role alongside Casemiro, then de Jong is definitely the man, and also the player that Ten Hag would want. He'd definitely be considered a Galactico signing alongside Theo and Mbappe, and I think having a left side of Theo, de Jong and Mbappe would arguably give United the best left side in world football. So that's what I think should and maybe will happen if Apple do take over Manchester United. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, give the video a like, check the description and subscribe to the channel, and follow my Instagram and Twitter, which will be linked in the description as well, for more content.